Hot take. Mega Man 2 is amazing, and I don't care what anyone says, I think this game is great. Okay, I'm only kidding. Mega Man 2 is one of the most celebrated games of all time. A permanent fixture on top NES games lists, one of gaming's most legendary soundtracks, and arguably the single greatest entry in the entire series. However, for all the praise it rightfully gets, its amazing final moments don't get enough love. Yeah, I'm about to show you how Mega Man 2 is even better than people give it credit for. Because you know the music, you know the level design, you know the bosses, but Mega Man 2's subversive and emotional closing minutes are not only brilliant on their own terms, but also a benchmark moment for video games. And I'm gonna break it all down for you in this video. But first, this video is sponsored by Squarespace. You can start your free Squarespace trial today by going to squarespace.com/stopskeletons and using the offer code STOPSKELETONS to get 10% off your first purchase. Stick around to the end of the video to see the website that we made along with the world's hottest hot dog gamer. On to the show. Quick history lesson before we begin. Mega Man 2 was famously a labor of love for the skeleton crew that made it. Mega Man 1 was one of Capcom's first NES games that wasn't an arcade port, however, it was not the hit they had expected. There was no interest in a sequel. But the development team so passionately believed in this series that they pledged to work on it after hours, so long as they didn't fall behind on other projects like Pro Baseball Murder Mystery. Mega Man 2 was essentially made pro bono, and according to Keiji Inafune was completed in only 3 to 4 months. It was released in late 1988 in Japan and mid-1989 in America. The happy ending is, of course, that Mega Man 2 became a huge hit, which is an interesting contrast to the game's melancholy ending that we will be discussing later. Our analysis begins at the end of the 5th level in Dr. Wily's castle. At this point, you have beaten 8 Robot Masters, fought through 4 Dr. Wily levels, beaten all 8 Robot Masters again, and are now finally squaring off with the Doc himself. He appears in a flying spaceship, very similar to the one used in Mega Man 1, and it even has 2 forms. There is every reason to expect this game to be ending right here, and it could have, and it still would have been great. I mean, that's how Mega Man 1 ended, and it was fine. It's fine. That game's got problems, but it's fine, kids. Leave it alone. But upon defeating Wily this time, he escapes in his UFO jet and the floor collapses beneath Mega Man. This right here is the moment where Mega Man 2 starts to break with traditional wisdom of how to end a video game. We cut back to the overworld screen where it is revealed that there is another level, a 6th secret level. Now that alone isn't too impressive, except the level itself throws everything out the window. It starts with Mega Man in free fall, and by the time you land 4 screens down, you realize there is no music. Well, think about how legendary this soundtrack is. It's one banger after another, and now suddenly, complete silence. And then, the acid droplets. There are no enemies in this section, only the droplets, meaning if you get hit, there's no way to farm for health. And Mega Man 2 has other environmental hazards, spikes, lava, lasers, but these all kill you instantly. These droplets are a huge shift, similar only to the spike traps seen briefly in Metal Man's stage and Wily Castle 2. But while the spike traps will kill you in 4 hits, these acid drops will take you out in only 3, making them one of the deadliest obstacles in the game. There's absolutely nothing familiar in this area, which is not only unsettling on its own, it also goes against the entire Wily Castle, which is basically a recycled greatest hits mishmash of enemies and obstacles seen previously. The cherry on top is the way the audio is mixed. Yes, there is no music, however, the sound of the acid drops are given priority on the sound channels, drowning out the sound of Mega Man jumping and shooting. It's very subtle, in fact, there's little reason to jump and shoot in this area, so this is easy to miss, and also, depending on the version, this isn't even true. The audio quality in the Anniversary Collection is pretty poor overall. Still, it takes something away that you as a player could always count on. And one final layer of disorientation, this is the shortest level in the game by a wide margin, outside of the boss rush room in the previous level. Seeing that boss door so soon is an oddly freaky moment. But it's all an opening act for the next surprise. Dr. Wily is an alien! By the way, this seems like it comes out of nowhere, but the Japanese subtitle is Secret of Dr. Wily, so I guess that explains it. The fight starts immediately with Alien Wily hurling shots at you and flying around. The movement of the stars makes the room almost feel like it's on a conveyor belt, and it's easy to miss Wily's first shot as it blends into the stars behind you. Of course, you are on a solid floor and not hurling through space, but even now it still takes a few seconds for me to get my bearings at the start of this fight. And of course, the only weapon that hurts Wily is Bubble. It feels like the developers are trolling here because it's maybe the most useless weapon in the game. Outside of Flashman's weapon, Bubble is the only weapon that doesn't shoot out ahead like a normal attack. It's good for Heatman, finding false floors in Wily 4, and that's about it. And I'm not sure if this is well known, but not only do none of the other weapons work, everything else actually heals Wily. So you gotta get in close to land hits, but that's treacherous because while his shots are super strong, touching Wily is almost instant death. The game is basically rewriting everything it taught you up to this point, and it's a tough, intense fight because of it. After beating Wily, we find out that he's not actually an alien. I was really young when I first beat this game, and I had no idea what was actually going on here until I was way older. At any rate, Wily is finally defeated, and we get the classic animation of him begging for his life accompanied by uproarious fanfare. We did it! But it's not over yet. All the previous violations of expectations stack for the final moment. Mega Man's long walk home. It's a simple sequence. As a sparsely composed, down-tempo, melancholy melody plays, we see Mega Man under a spotlight, walking in front of a picturesque village as the seasons change around him. When daylight finally breaks, he stops and looks up. The picture expands to fill the frame, and we see that Mega Man is gone, but he has left his helmet behind. The song concludes on a sustained, unresolved final note, fading out. It is only a minute long, and it chokes me up every time. This sequence is unexpected and different, both from Mega Man 1, which, let's be honest, most first-time players of Mega Man 2 had not played at the time, and of games at large. There's an interesting discussion to be had with how this ending differs from others in this series, but I don't want to have that discussion right now, and we don't need to have that discussion. It's important to remember that when the team was making this game, they didn't know if they'd ever make another one, and they didn't know what Mega Man would become. There is a lot to unpack in this moment, and why it's so meaningful and unusual. First off, this is not a thanks for playing message like you'd expect at the end of most games of this era. We'll get that later during the credits. But this is not the credits. This is a cinematic. It is meant to be viewed as part of the game and as part of the story. And it's not celebratory at all. Yo, Mega Man is not happy here, even though he has every reason to be happy. Good has triumphed over evil. The day has been saved, yet we have multiple indications that everything is not okay. For starters, Mega Man is alone. Maybe he wanted to be alone with his thoughts, or maybe there really is no celebration because being a hero can be a thankless job. Either way, it's not all that important. This ending is not the real world. It's a metaphorical depiction of Mega Man's internal thoughts and feelings. For example, the ending cycles through 5 seasons, 2 of which, by the way, are Cherry Blossom and Monsoon. Don't forget this is a Japanese game. I don't think he literally takes a full calendar year to walk home. If the dev team wanted to be literal, they could have ended on a gag of, "Oh no, Mega Man, where have you been? Wily's back!" which would have left the game on a cliffhanger and could have served as a strategy to get 6-year-olds like me begging for a Mega Man 3. However, there's no commercial angle to this. It instead symbolizes how long and deep his contemplation was. But what is he contemplating? To me, there's significance to the helmet. It's interesting how it bookends the beginning and ending of Mega Man's journey. The first time we see Mega Man, the wind is blowing in his hair, which symbolizes freedom. But Mega Man doesn't put the helmet on at the beginning of the game, it warps onto him. To me, this ending is a statement of Mega Man's struggle with life outside of battle, and the helmet is the centerpiece. He leaves the helmet behind in order to leave the battle behind. However, this is a fleeting act. Taking off the helmet is pretending that he has a choice because fundamentally, Mega Man doesn't. When it's time for battle again, the helmet will warp back onto his head. He can never really take it off. So taking off the helmet is him exercising the most freedom he has, and maybe he knows that. Hence the sad, unresolved melody that finishes the song. This final gut punch in Mega Man 2 is what all the subversions of the ending sequences had been building up to. Mega Man is a reluctant hero. He has defeated Wily not because he wants to, but because he has to. This ending creates a schism between Mega Man as a character and you as a player. You might have had a great time playing and beating this game, but Mega Man didn't. Mega Man is sad. You are not Mega Man. This ending is fantastic on its own terms, but this separation is what makes it an extraordinary moment in video game history. Megaman 2 was released in Japan in late 1988. By then, the home console market was still in its infancy and establishing itself as a unique space next to the arcade market. Arcade games had different goals than console games. Console games are a big upfront investment and therefore come with the expectation of a longer and more intimate product overall, whereas arcades are designed to grab your attention and keep it long enough to squeeze a few quarters out of you. And this is not to say there aren't exceptions to this. A big one is Namco's Splatterhouse, also released in 1988. But overall, there wasn't an emphasis on story in arcades because there didn't need to be. Capcom's own Willow is an example of these differences. The ending of the NES version, Megaman's own Kitamura by the way, is a slideshow of memorable locales highlighting the long journey the player took through the game, solidifying it as an experience you shared with the game. While the arcade ending is all about how dope this young hunky Val Kilmer looks. Console games had less hardware power at their disposal, but the potential for a more intimate, personal experience made up for it. By the time Mega Man 2 was released, consoles had been experimenting with subverting audiences, but none had pushed the boundaries as far on both gameplay and emotional levels. Double Dragon on the NES deviated from the arcade version by revealing that Billy's twin brother Jimmy orchestrated Marion's kidnapping. Zelda 2: Link's Adventure ends on a pretty tense note where Link fights himself. In the original Metal Gear, Big Boss is not only revealed to be the evil mastermind, but even tells Snake to turn off the MSX. Ghosts and Goblins made you play the whole game over again, but that was just mean, screw that. And maybe the biggest subversion was Metroid completely recontextualizing itself with the reveal that Samus was a woman, if you were good enough. This is probably the closest to Mega Man 2's ending in terms of rewriting the player's relationship to the central character, but this is more of a reward for beating the game fast instead of an emotional payoff. We don't see how any of these revelations affect the characters, and this is how Mega Man 2 is different. Of course, subsequent Metal Gear, Zelda, and Metroid games would humanize their characters eventually, but not until the next decade. Mega Man 2 stands nearly on its own for the time. By the way, my interpretation with the helmet and other things is just that. My interpretation. There's not a quote official interpretation for this ending as far as we can tell. And that's kind of beautiful. Series creator Akira Kitamura has discussed Mega Man's character broadly as a lonely and reluctant hero in interviews, but he's not talked about this ending. It may also be a reflection of the team's own emotions. They put it all on the line, and they had no reason to believe a third game would ever be made. Ultimately, what Kitamura or any of the other creators intended doesn't really matter. It's about the people who played and experienced it and how it made them feel. This ending has always meant a lot to me, and I think having first experienced it at such a young age, it primed me early on for what the medium of video games can accomplish. So, regardless of what this ending means to you, it's meaningful that it made us stop and think deeper about the characters we play in video games. This video is sponsored in part by Squarespace. With their 24/7, 365-day support, they've created a platform that's flexible for any kind of website, from musician to designer to hot dog gamers who just want to talk about their favorite video game dogs. We made this website for our dog because Squarespace said we could, and Stop Skeletons and Fighting has a lot of opinions about video game dogs. For real, we did make this site, so let us know what video game dog you want the hot dog gamer to talk about next in the comments below. You can start your free Squarespace trial today by going to squarespace.com/stopskeletons and using the offer code STOPSKELETONS to get 10% off your first purchase. That's squarespace.com/stopskeletons and the code STOPSKELETONS. This show also supported by our lovely Patreon supporters. If you want to support the show and see your name here, click the link and give what you can. Also, hey, if you're new to the channel, give us a sub, hit that bell, hit a like, and let us know what you think in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching.